comment, please use the raise your hand function on Zoom. Staff will call on you and unmute you. We ask that speakers give their name and address for the minutes. The county reserves the right to shut off the microphone and remove any speaker from a meeting if they are vulgar, rude, or inappropriate. The chat function has been disabled and a recording of the meeting will be available on our website after each meeting. All right. So we have 4 items on our consent agenda today, 2 items on our regular agenda. Then we'll have appointments, if any, general public comment, commissioner, administrator, miscellaneous. So we'll start with the consent agenda. Any commissioner have an item they would like to have removed from the consent agenda?
I do not.
And Sarah, for those of you who have not been at our meetings before, we'll run you through this. We're almost doing this by heart now. Sarah, do we have anybody there at the courthouse who would like to speak to remove a consent agenda item?
No, we do not.
Thank you. And Jill Jolliker online, anyone there?
Nope.
Okay, thank you, Jill. So I'll accept a motion for items 1, 2, 3, and 4 for the consent.
You're
Move
muted.
to approve. What?
Second.
Moved and seconded. I think we got everybody. Okay. Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Passes 3-0. For the public, we did lots of Zoom meetings last week. For our budget hearings this week, we may be a little bit out of practice. We're getting back used to it again, so bear with us. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the regular agenda items. I see that Catherine is here from the planning department. And our first item is to consider a conditional use permit, a CUP 20-00140 for equipment storage, heavy use north of northeast corner of North 1100 Road and East 1600 Road. I also see Mary Miller here. I'm not quite sure who is up first. Catherine, is that you? Okay, excellent. Thank you, Catherine. Welcome to our meeting. Share your report, please.
Good evening, commissioners. I've opted not to do presentations tonight because there were only 2 images in the staff report, and that was the map and the location of the project. So I'm just going to walk you through it verbally, and if there's any questions, feel free to ask, and I will refer you to where they are hopefully answered in the staff report. So this is for, again, this is Catherine Week, one of the planners from the planning office. This is for a conditional use permit request for heavy equipment storage at just north of the intersection of North 1100 Road and East 1650 Road. It would take access off East 1650 Road. And it is for the storage of trucks for the Honeybee Septic Company. So in reviewing, I'm going to kind of go through the staff findings for each of the items briefly, just kind of give you a synopsis. Again, the proposal is just for the truck storage. That's what this conditional use permit request is for. They're proposing to do a 50 by 60 foot metal building that would house the storage of their trucks overnight. It's being proposed to be in the southeast kind of corner of the property and outside of the regulatory floodplain that does exist on that property just to the northeast along that northeast corner. So in reviewing for conditional use permits, the things that we look for are we consider the zoning and whether or not the use of the property is compatible with the nearby zoning. This property is zoned AG1, which is agriculture. While agriculture does not permit this use, it is an enumerated use in the conditional use permit section. And as long as it's evaluated under the criteria set forth to determine whether it's suitable, it is a tool that can be used to determine whether uses that are typically not approved in the zoning district can be compatible with the proposed location. So the surrounding zoning of this area is primarily AG1 and AG2. To the northeast of this property, it's actually in the city limits, and that is for the water treatment facility. That is actually zoned GPI-FP, which is a floodplain overlay district for the general public and institutional zoning district within the city. This property also lies within Tier 3 of the growth area under Plan 2040. However, that floodplain GPI district where the water treatment facility is located is considered Tier 1. So this is a Tier 3 piece of property that is adjacent to Tier 1. And that could be relevant in the context. Typically, Tier 3 properties are not anticipated to develop. However, being adjacent to city limits, it could potentially develop in the future if growth is determined to be warranted in that area. So staff finds regarding the zoning of the surrounding area that the proposed use as not permitted in AG, but under the conditional use permit could be suited for the zoning district with specific conditions as enumerated in the staff report. The character of the area, as I mentioned, is primarily agricultural and the industrial type nature of the wastewater treatment facility to the northeast. Staff's finding is that the property, because it's adjacent to that wastewater treatment facility, that the proposed request would not significantly alter the character of the area. It's not encroaching on a highly agricultural area in that northeast. It's kind of bordered by that entire facility, and it's not encroaching on a rural neighborhood. So with those conditions, staff again found that the use could be compatible with the character of the area. So the land is currently open land. As of 2017, this company does have permission or is approved through the health department to use this as spread area on this particular property. Again, this CUP does not impact that use that is already happening on that site. This CUP is just for the storage of the overnight storage of the trucks. So that's what we're considering under this staff review. Again, staff found that with the conditions, particularly that being for a truck route, there's already a designated truck route that the trucks are to come from North 1100 Road up East 1650. As long as they are maintaining that same route, this could be compatible with the area for that particular use of the trucks. Again, the trucks are already coming to the site. This would just be to store the trucks overnight, this UP, and there wouldn't be significant increase in truck traffic as what there is today. So the proposed 50 by 60 building, again, is going to be in that southeast corner of the property. As noted on the site plan, in the staff report, I believe it's on page 4, that there is some already natural hedge trees or screening that is on that south property line. They're not proposing to remove any of those trees, so there would be some natural screening there just to the south of that building, which would, again, aid in the screening, even though the trucks are going to be stored inside the metal building. Also, one of the goals of the comprehensive plan, when we evaluate whether it's compatible with Plan 2040, the floodplain areas are intended to be kept open. One of the conditions staff is recommending is that no development activity would take place in the floodplain area. This proposal is actually outside the regulatory floodplain. And so one of the conditions is that any activity associated with the CUP shall remain outside of that floodplain area. We also consider, when we're looking at that Plan 2040, whether or not using the conditional use permit tool, whether the use conforms to the goals set forth in that plan. Again, this is a Tier 3 area. However, it's abutted next to a Tier 1. So if this property were to ever to be annexed in the future, this particular use would fall under the fleet storage category in city, traditional city, in city limit zoning. There would not be a comprehensive plan amendment that would need to be associated with rezoning to a use that would accommodate that. Because this particular area is not in a specific sector plan, there would not be any associated amendment that would need to take place. So the conditional use permit and granting the truck storage here would not create an issue in annexing potentially in the future if this property were to come into a tier 1 city limit zoning. So in conclusion, I think staff is in fact recommending that approval with the conditions that are enumerated in the staff report. The Planning Commission heard this item and voted 9-0 to forward onto you with the recommendation for approval. One change that they did point out is one of the conditions had a should in it instead of a shall. All of the conditions should say shall, so that would be the condition that would carry forward to you all, that all the conditions have the word shall in it. And I actually also noticed today that the 5-year time limit, it says 2025 and 2029 in the staff report. However, if we base that off of the approval dates today, that would be 2025 for the 5-year review and year 2030 for the 10-year expiration date. So that could be noted as something you might want to consider when you're considering this item. And I would be happy to stand for any questions if you have them, or if I can refer you to any specific concerns you might have. Oh, I will say too, we did have some communication on this item. I believe there was a communication in the packet. We did receive 6 or so phone calls when the notification letter went out about the project. They were inquiring about the scope of it, and we tried to address the concerns. And then you do have the communications that came in. They were forwarded on to you. We have not had additional communication since the Planning Commission has heard that item. So.
Thank you, Catherine. We'll hear from the applicant, but yeah, let's go ahead and hear from the applicant first.
Hi, I'm Joy Ray with Paul Werner Architects on behalf of Honeybee Septic. Greg Polk is also on here if we have questions for him, but Catherine pretty much summed it up, and we were good with the conditions, and we're just happy to move forward with this proposal.
Thank you, Joy. Appreciate you coming today. We may have some questions for you.
Okay.
Real quick before we take any questions from the commission, did any of the Board of County Commissioners have ex parte communications they need to disclose on this item? For the public, ex parte communications or communications any one of the commissioners might have had outside of the written communications that were sent, and they need to share them with the rest of the commission before we make a decision.
I did not.
I didn't.
I didn't either. So, commissioners, do you have any questions for Catherine or Joy before we turn it open for public comment on this item? No. Okay. So we'll open it up for public comment. Sarah, is there anybody there at the courthouse who would like to provide public comment on this item?
There is not.
There's not. And Jill is monitoring our online attendees.
I'm not seeing anybody.
Great. Thank you, Jill. All right. If there's no questions and there's no public comment, this would be the time for comments or motions. I'll go ahead and make a motion if it's okay with the commission to approve the conditional use permit CUP 20-00140 for equipment storage, heavy use located north of northeast corner of North 1100 Road and East 1600 Road based on the finding of facts and subject to the conditions listed in the staff report with the revision recommended by the Lawrence Douglas County Planning Commission.
And that includes changing, we shall change should to shall.
That would be the changes they suggested, and it's really great that our Planning Commission is paying close attention to the
We'll second.
Well, and what about changing, as Catherine suggested, changing the time frame to a true 5-year and 10-year time frame?
Yeah, I'll accept that change to my motion. So we'll change that to the 2025, I believe is what Catherine talked about, instead of 2024. Commissioner DeRusso, would you be willing to second that change?
I will second that.
Thank you, appreciate that. Okay, any further discussion on this item?
No.
All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Passes 3-0. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Joy. Thank you, Mr. Polk, for attending. And now we'll move it to our second item, considering the rezoning of 7/20/20-00127 46.44 acres from County AG1 to County AG2 at 915 East 1900 Road. Welcome Mary Miller to the conversation. Hi, Mary.
Hello, good evening. And as you said, I'll be presenting this rezoning request, and I will start out by trying to share my screen. Oh, it says it's disabled. Is it possible to share my screen?
Give us a second.
Okay.
Try again, Mary.
Are you seeing a slideshow or just my slides? Oh, there we go.
Yep, there we go.
Always a challenge. Thank you. As you mentioned, this is a rezoning request for approximately 46 acres located at 915 East 1900 Road, or County Route 1057. The request is to rezone from the Ag 1 Agricultural District to Ag 2 Transitional Agriculture. The property is located in the northwest corner of the intersection of East 1900 Road and North 900 Road. It's just south of the boundaries of the Lawrence urban growth area and is just outside of the 3-mile radius of the city of Eudora. This shows the subject property. It consists of approximately, it looks like it's divided in thirds. Approximately 1/3 is tilled land, 1/3 is grassland, and 1/3 is kept as open space due to some steep terrain. With all rezoning requests, we look at the review criteria in the zoning regulations, and these include the golden factors. And one of the first golden factors is always the zoning and land use of the nearby properties. The subject property is currently zoned Ag 1, and the request is to zone it to Ag 2. The nearby areas are zoned Ag 1 and Ag 2. There's a small portion of CP, that's the cluster preservation zoning to the east, and that's a rural residential subdivision that was platted prior to 2006. So the rezoning to the Ag 2 would be consistent with the rezoning pattern in the area. For the land use, we look at the Douglas County Appraiser's Office files or records. The land use in this area is agriculture or residential. The purple is agriculture and yellow is residential. There's a few that are marked as vacant. That's the gray rectangles. Those are primarily land that's not used for agriculture, but also is not developed residentially. But it's zoned for residential or Ag 2 zoning. The aerial shows the same land use development pattern. To the south of the subject property, some of the Ag 2 zonings, while they're shown as residential, they're a mix of residential and agricultural uses. The residential yards extend back away, and then to the west of that, it's grassland. The Ag 2 zoning then would be, and the residential uses would be compatible with other land uses in the area. Another criteria we look at is that the character of the area. Is the proposed use compatible with that? And so I'm using basically a 1-mile radius. So I'm looking at the section the property is in and then the adjacent 3 sections. This graphic just shows generally the location of residences in this area. And it's very possible that I make errors on this because I'm just using the aerial. So it's only intended to provide a general idea of where most of the residences are. Based on this, residences are seen to be located along East 1900 Road. And then we have that platted subdivision to the east. The primary residential development is clustered around that intersection, and the other portions of this area have lower density residential uses and larger scale agricultural. The additional residences in this location would be compatible with the character of the area. And it would allow for efficiencies for the township, the fire station, rural water district, and other utility providers, as it would be part of a clustered residential area. We also look at what is the suitability of the subject property for the uses to which it is currently restricted under the current zoning. The Ag 1 and the Ag 2 zoning districts have a very similar list of permitted uses. The difference is that the Ag 2 district can have more conditional uses, but these require approval of a conditional use permit, which is the equivalent of another rezoning. The northwestern portion of this site is got the steep terrain, so it's suitable for open space, and the remainder is suitable for agriculture, which is permitted in both the Ag 1 and Ag 2 district. So the subject property is suitable for uses which are allowed in both the Ag 1 and Ag 2 district. And I'm sorry, I meant to go through what uses are allowed in those districts. I thought that might be interesting. In the Ag 1 and Ag 2 district, uses that are allowed without a conditional use permit are agriculture, hobby farm, agritourism, ancillary ag retail sales, detached dwellings, group home limited, home occupations, type 1 and 2, although a type 2 does require a CUP in the Ag 2 district, daycare home, research facility, ag-related, small scale. And the property is well suited for uses that are allowed in both the Ag 1 and Ag 2 district. And so another golden factor is to evaluate what detrimental impact there could be from the rezoning on nearby properties. As the uses permitted in the two districts are very similar, the rezoning would not result in uses that are not compatible with nearby properties. The difference with the Ag 2 zoning is the amount or the density of residential development that's possible. With Ag 1, you have a maximum of 1 residence per 20 acres. The 46-acre parcel could be divided into 2 residential parcels. With Ag 2, you have a maximum density of 2 dwelling units per 20 acres. So the maximum possible would be 4 residences. With the higher classification road, that's East 1900 Road, a minor arterial, and the amount of residential development already in the area, the increase of 2 additional residences in this corner is not expected to have any detrimental impact on nearby properties. With the adoption of the revised zoning regulations, some additional review criteria were added. One was the impact of rezoning on environmentally sensitive lands. And so the subdivision regulations list the following as environmentally sensitive lands: regulatory floodway fringe, wetland, stream corridor, native prairie that is voluntarily listed for protection, prime farmland, stand and mature trees, and archaeologic or historic sites. So the graphic on the left shows the environmentally sensitive lands as identified in the subregs. The green area is prime farmland, and the blue hatch marks identify wetlands that are marked on the Fish and Wildlife Services. Plan 2040 lists the following as environmentally sensitive lands: rare plant and animal habitat, floodplain, high quality ag soils, that's class 1 and 2, native prairies, native woodlands, urban tree canopy, wetlands, stream corridors, and steep slopes. So looking at these, the additional feature that would be included would be steep slopes, and these are shown in orange on the graphic on the right. The Kansas Biological Survey evaluated the property and commented that there was no rare plant or animal habitat. There are no soils identified as class 1 or 2 on the property. And although this is an outdated identifying system that the NRCS no longer uses, our GIS map contains the old class 1 and 2 layer since it's mentioned in our comprehensive plan. Dividing the land through a certificate of survey, which would be possible following rezoning to the Ag 2 district, would require environmentally sensitive lands to be located outside the building envelope, up to a maximum of 40% of the site. More can be placed outside the envelope voluntarily, but this is a limit on the requirement itself. The rezoning would make land division through a certificate of survey possible. With the assignment of building envelopes, environmentally sensitive lands up to at least 40% of the site would be protected. And another new review criteria is measuring the suitability of the property for agricultural uses. And this is something zoning and code staff and planning staff are working together with NRCS to develop a set of metrics so that we can have a non-subjective review and analysis of the agricultural suitability. We're working with them right now. NRCS recommends the use of the NCCPI, the National Commodity Crop Production Index, as a metric. Right now, we're working through the metrics manually to get a feeling for how they apply to various properties and decide which metrics we think are appropriate before we establish a LISA or other land evaluation system. Following the commission discussion and getting comments from the public, as well as information we learned from our review of several properties, that will help us establish a good set of metrics that we'll bring before you before they are adopted. We do look at soil maps, but the NRCS and the Department of Agriculture websites provide disclaimers on the maps that they are fairly accurate at large scales, but are not accurate at the scales at which we use them. So the Commodity Crop Production Index was recommended as one of the most accurate metrics, but another index for grassland or rangeland would also be needed to evaluate the suitability for pasture or hay fields. And the NRCS staff said that would be available to us, and so they're going to work to get that, to make that available to us. When this is provided, we will have a computerized method once we've established the metrics where we can just enter the information and it will take this all into account. And one thing we want to add to that is topographical or other site constraints, so that if a land appears from the soil capabilities to be high quality agricultural land, but if it's completely covered with stands of mature trees or wetlands, that we would not give it a high productivity rating for agriculture. So this graphic shows the NCCPI, or that Commodity Crop Production Index, for the subject property. With 100 being the highest productivity level, about 7 acres is rated between 30 and 40%, and that's down in the southwest corner. It's labeled as A. And 39.3 acres is rated at 40 to 50% productivity. And then the B up in the northwest corner, that again is that area that's open space now because of the topography. From the information we have at this time, it appears that the property is suitable for agricultural purposes, but of average productivity. So other factors that we look at is the length of time it's vacant as zoned. It's never been developed, but it's always been farmed, so we wouldn't consider it as being vacant. Compliance with area plans. There have been no area plans adopted for this area. And then what would the gain to the public health, safety, and welfare be by the denial of the rezoning request, or what negative impacts would be avoided? As the two residences, or the two additional residences, would be located in an area that is already developed as residences, the rezoning would result in additional clustering of residences at this location, providing efficiencies of operations for the rural water districts, the road maintenance agencies, utilities, and et cetera. No gain to the public health, safety, or welfare has been identified from the denial of the rezoning request. And then the final golden factor we look at is, does the request comply with the recommendations in the comprehensive plan? And these are some of the recommendations about growth management and residential development in Douglas County. They do say that we should seek conservation of identified sensitive lands, minimizing agricultural land conversion to non-agricultural uses, maintain working lands and high quality agricultural soils for future generations, to minimize non-agricultural residential development outside the urban growth area, and to provide housing opportunities while conserving the overall rural character of Douglas County. So this review included a review of the agricultural nature of the property, the compatibility of the proposed zoning and land division with the character of the area. And the result of the review is that, in staff's opinion, the requested rezoning is compliant with the recommendations in the comprehensive plan. The Planning Commission considered this item at their June 24th meeting and voted 9-1 to forward it to you with a recommendation for approval. And the dissenting commissioner noted that she supported the rezoning, but was voting in opposition to ensure a full discussion at the county commission meeting. Let me see if I can unshare my screen. Yeah. Okay, and so that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions, but the applicant is also present today.
Thank you, Mary. Appreciate that report. Would the applicant like to make any comments? Mr. Hanson, I think that's you. There you go. We can hear you now.
I appreciate staff's work on this. I commend their level of service. I appreciate the Planning Commission's recommendation to you. I appreciate your taking this into consideration. I respectfully request that you would approve this request.
Thank you, sir. Commissioners, this is another item that we need to disclose any ex parte communications that we have had. Just like on the last item, I have not had any ex parte communications on this item. Any others?
I have not either.
Commissioner?
No.
No. Okay, so no ex parte communications on this. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Mary or for the applicant before we open it up for public comment?
I do not.
I have a question for Mr. Hanson, and I mostly just out of curiosity. I'm excited at the idea of something that sounds like maybe our first agri-hood, you know, a cluster development based on housing with agriculture. It's a real thing. It's a thing in planning, and it's actually kind of fabulous. So I'm wondering, Mr. Hanson, what is your background in this? Is the sustainable local food production something that you do, or is that something that you are just hoping to bring into the neighborhood?
It's both. We have, my wife and I have raised kids always in a country setting, and we've always had, I'm from a farm background. The people that have expressed interest in this all are very much interested in agricultural, small scale, sustainable agriculture. I heard it referred to as hobby farming. I think they look at it as maybe more small scale. It is in the area where growlawrence.org has a cluster of members. So I think it fits well and is consistent with that area.
So I guess I watched the video from the Planning Commission, and I think one of the concerns that was brought up resonated with me, and that is the opportunity to divide this land further and making the case for it by kind of putting out there that it would be something that would be a beautiful food producing kind of small cluster neighborhood that really goes along with some values that Douglas County has. It's a lovely vision. I guess I'm wondering what assurance there is that that is actually the, you know, that would be the end result. I know you can't put a covenant on that, but we can't condition that. But I guess I'm just wondering how likely it is that this really will become kind of a small scale agricultural development, because that would be a remarkable win for our community.
I have shared in my communications, I've shared, I think, with Mary, the people's enthusiasm for the opportunity to have a small acreage where they could have this. And our communications back and forth have included how excited they are for this opportunity.
Do you have a sense of what kind of food production we're talking about?
There was reference to large vegetable garden. I think they were, our communication was at the time when we had such a problem in the meatpacking industry with the current pandemic, and how maybe this is a sign to us that we need to move to more self-reliance, more what do I want to say, to be able to produce some of our own, so that we're not as susceptible, not as vulnerable to what we've experienced.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess I would commend to you, if the vision is for it to be a food producing kind of small scale agricultural venture, and that is how you've set it out. So that would certainly be the hope, that we have all sorts of resources for folks who want to start small scale agriculture. It turns out to be pretty big and pretty hard. So we have a great extension office that can offer all sorts of help. And we have some great local food producers, both small and large scale. So you can plug into all sorts of experienced people who can help with that local ag, local food, marketing and distribution. All of that is here. So I'm really excited about this. I just hope that vision is real. I hope that there's, you know, that the folks who are interested in it follow through, and that we can look 4 or 5 years down the line and see real, true food production there. That would be such a great win for us in the county.
I've followed Mr. Llewellyn's. I've been on his emails, and I intend to offer those communications as well, so we can take advantage of the resources you're mentioning.
That would be great. And please, I'm pretty closely connected to the local food system here and growers and all of that. Please feel free to reach out to me if you ever have a question or you want to get connected to other folks in that sector. Be happy to help.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Mary or the applicant? Okay. Mary, I maybe have a quick question, and I'm not quite sure how to phrase it as a question, so maybe you'll help me. I was really interested in the indexing that you're doing and sort of noticed that the least identified agricultural land was that land which is actually being farmed. Did I understand that correct? I mean, and that's just an interesting, as we think about using that index more, do you have any thoughts on that? Was just, I was trying to make some sense of that.
Yeah, that was, it was down in the corner where it was actually farmed. Yeah, it did have the lowest productivity. So evidently they rate the soil, and I don't know if they look at the productivity of it. I think they look at the soil capability, and they have some formula they use, but evidently they may be better off if they farmed what they have in grassland, looking at that graphic.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we're still working with them. We want to learn more about it. So we've had one Zoom meeting. We'll probably have a few more. It'd be nice if we can meet in person and kind of see more of the hands-on stuff. But, you know, Riley County is a county we kind of look at as an example. So they have a system where they assign scores. If you score above 80, you should not be developed. If you score above 60, maybe you shouldn't be. And we're hoping to have something like that in the end. But we need to do a few of these case studies where we can see how does that productivity actually line up with what's happening. You're right.
Yeah, that'll. I mean, I'm excited to have data to look at, you know, and will that be something you would bring back to the commission if there's certain scores, or is that something you would do administratively?
It would come back. It would be part of the rezoning, and it's from the examples we've seen from other people, you get a little chart, a little report. So it gives you the score, and then it tells you how it was broken down. So you can kind of look through and see how did it score, what did it score on. And some of the places, they look at other things like how close are other residences, but I don't think, we're not really planning on looking at that because we look at that at other portions of our report. So we would just be looking at agricultural productivity.
Thank you, Mary. And for Mr. Hansen, was that report surprising to you? Did you learn something from that? Might you, just interested to hear from the applicant how that may help you, or it just doesn't matter at all. It's just a planning tool.
Like you, I found it interesting that the maps were indicating one thing, but the practice would indicate another.
Okay, thanks. That's all my questions. Let's open this up for public comment. We'll start with Sarah.
I don't have anyone here.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Jill, is there anybody who'd like to speak on this item online?
I'm not seeing anyone.
Okay, bring it back up to the commission for discussion and or motions and votes.
I don't have any other concerns, questions. I just wanted to compliment Mary and say that it's really exciting to hear a whole new level of information being presented, a really deep, detailed report on soils and natural resources and all of that. It's lovely to hear that coming through in the planning report, and I'm excited. This is our first cluster development and kind of first step in a new direction, and it's nice to hear it. And thank you for all your hard work, Mary. So my problem is I was not able to pull up the agenda, so I don't have the CUP in front of me. Otherwise, I would be happy to make the motion. But Patrick or Michelle, go ahead.
I wasn't able to pull it up in front of me either, so
I
I don't have all
I
the,
can make a motion. Yeah, I can make a motion. I just want to echo Commissioner Thelman's comments about, this seems like such a thoughtful way of looking at these. And I think, my first reaction, having gone through the Plan 2040 process, is, this looks like a cluster development. It looks like we're putting residences in rural spaces. And we have to balance that against the need for housing in a rural space. I mean, it's not like we're never going to build another house in a rural space. So what I'm more confident in is the thought that's going into it, that we're looking at data, that our planning staff is really going deeply into with the applicant to say, is this the right mix? And I just want to share with the public that, when it comes to us, this is sort of the last bit of it. It's gone through a lot of discussion of, is this the right application? And so when staff is making the recommendation, that gives me a whole lot more confidence that we're following Plan 2040 and those ideals that we put forth there. So it's great to see the process happening. I'm comfortable with it, looking at what the other uses are in that area and how close it is to the urban growth area. This seems like the right type of development. I'm with Commissioner Thelman. I would like to make sure it stays hobby farming, but I also understand that's a hard thing to do in those rural areas, and that it may not be able to stay that way, but at least we've preserved 40% for those natural resources. So that's a step in the right direction. That's more process than we had before. We did notify the neighbors, and I just feel like we're doing it right now. And so thank you, Mary, for all the work that you and your team has done to put this together. It's neat to see one of these, and for Mr. Hansen for going through that whole process, because that was a whole lot more than it was just a few months ago, and we appreciate it. I'll make the motion to approve the request to rezone 720-00127, approximately 46.44 acres from AG1 Agricultural District to AG2 Transition Agricultural District based on the findings presented in the staff report.
Second.
Moved and seconded, and I hope that we provided enough commentary for Planning Commissioner Willie, who I watched the video, and her request for us to discuss it. I hope we met that bar. We really appreciate our planning commissioners. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes 3-0. Thank you, Mary. Thank you,
Thanks,
Mr.
Mary.
All right, with that, we'll move on to appointments. Commissioners, I believe we did have a request for an appointment today. I did not have a chance to look at it yet. Maybe not. Maybe it was just a summary of our.
We already approved Roger, right? Okay.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Robin has sent an update on a couple of upcoming boards. So.
Okay. So none today. I don't think, unless any commissioner has one. Okay.
But thank you, Robin. I'll get to work on seeing if some of those people want to be reappointed.
Okay, moving on to general public comment. General public comment is at the end of each of our meeting with a limit of 1 comment per person. Commission reserves the right to place a time limit of 3 minutes per speaker if desired. Individuals may not give unused time to other speakers. As a general practice, the Commission will not discuss or debate, nor will the Commission make decisions on items presented during this time. Rather, they'll refer the item to staff for follow-up if necessary. All comments should be directed towards the County Commission. Sarah, do we have anybody there at the courthouse who would like to provide public comment to the Commission?
We do not.
Jill, is there anyone online?
Nope.
All right, we will close our general public comment and move on to Commissioner and/or Administrator Miscellaneous. And we usually begin this time with some comments from Sarah.
Good evening, Commissioners. I did, my weekly memo was a little sparse this week, but we did include the information on some upcoming appointments. So if you guys want to take a look at that, and we can kind of plan for that in the future, we can work on that. I did want to note one thing that I forgot to get in the weekly memo. So next week at 4 o'clock, we do have a work session with an update from our arts and cultural partners that have requested to have a conversation. This would be representatives of the Lawrence Arts Center, the Watkins Community Museum, and amongst others, to just share with the commissioners some impacts of COVID-19 on their sector of our community. So that will be at 4 o'clock next week. I would also add that there was a press release just sent out just as we were entering the meeting from Dr. Marcelino in terms of public health orders. Really, we had said 2 weeks ago when we put in the restriction can you guys hear me? I'm sorry.
Sarah, you broke up there for just a minute. You might want to back up and repeat maybe the last 30 seconds of what you said.
Sure. So right before the commission meeting started, we got, there was a press release from Dr. Marcelino related to some public health orders. About 2 weeks ago, when we shut down bars, we had indicated that we would revisit that decision in 2 weeks. Well, that 2 weeks has come. Dr. Marcelino is extending that bar closure. And we're not really putting a time limit on this point. We're going to come back to the community when we feel like it is safe to talk about that opening again. I would say that, the impact of the bar closure and mask order is beginning to work. We are seeing fewer new cases in our community, and our updates from public health are indicating that. So we felt like that was a good indication of our work as a community to help control the spread. So you'll see that information. I would say that a significant amount of staff time around the courthouse these days is really devoted to planning around the CARES Act Round 1 funding for our community. We've got a large staff team for us working on trying to get information out to the community on that. I've been a part of numerous presentations to recovery support functions and community support groups, community groups this week, and public entities to talk about the mechanisms for developing that. I will be visiting with the commission as we put those timelines together as to how best I can get that information to you in advance for your consideration once it's compiled. So there is a page on our Coronavirus Hub website dedicated to that CARES Act Round 1 funding. So if you have questions from folks, we ask folks to kind of route their questions there, and then we will get information out to the community from it. But it's really exciting to see some of the plans that a number of folks in our community are working on. The University of Kansas, public health, and other educational providers trying to do their best to get ready for what we have ahead of us for the rest of this year. And I don't know if the commissioners have any questions on that. I know it's a difficult process with a lot of moving parts, but we're excited to begin to distribute these funds to the community.
Sarah, I sort of have a question, and I don't really intend to put you on the spot here, and we may want to bring some people back to talk to us a little bit, but I am hearing quite a bit about wider testing. What would it do? What are the pluses and minuses? I'm hearing, quite honestly, I'm hearing advocates for wider testing, and I guess I don't. I mean, if your initial reaction is yes, more testing is better, but I would like to hear, maybe from our health department, sort of what more testing means and how they might use that. I mean, I'm assuming that would be part of their proposal, either for or against it, from that health and medical group. Do you have any comments on that? I mean, I just know I'm hearing a lot more about wider testing.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's something that's discussed amongst the recovery coordination team and with public health. And I think those conversations continue to evolve as we learn more. A lot of it is about, right now, since there's really been a real surge in testing, it's taking longer to get results back. And so I think there are some concerns about, do we have the capacity in the region to accommodate the levels of testing that we feel like we're going to need to do. So that's definitely a part of our planning in terms of where do we think testing should be and how do we hit that mark. And there are some goals to achieve in that area. You know, like we have said all along, there is expanded testing now. So folks that have had access or have had contact with a positive case but don't have a symptom have the ability to get tested. And there are options for private testing and public testing now. And so we encourage folks to, and then, you know, we had a heart-to-heart in our community over the last week doing extensive testing. We anticipate that they tested over 1,000 individuals over a couple days. And with more testing, we will get more positives, but that's a good thing because we know what the state of our community is in and where they're at. The disadvantage of, you know, well, let's just test everybody right now. Not only do we not have the capacity to necessarily handle all of those test results, it's really only true for that one day in time. And testing would need to be done on a more regular basis to sort of verify and confirm that the person has remained negative in that sense. So, but I definitely think that's something we can bring back as we talk more about our capacity. And I've made a note of that, and I will visit further with the health department to bring that information back.
Thank you. That's helpful. And I'm glad we're hearing from our ORTS organizations. Anything we can do to sort of spread out the massive amounts of information we're about to get over the next couple of weeks, I think as a commissioner, I would really appreciate that. So bringing people in earlier, you know, just to tell us what they're thinking, I think will help me sort of process all that information. I'm a little worried about the big decisions we have before us and wanting to have as much information as possible and time to think about it.
And I would say that, and this is, I want us to talk through that because we have planned to cancel our August 5th meeting, and that would be the meeting right before we would need to adopt this plan. So I do want to talk to the commission about how we can make sure that we're being fully transparent with these dollars and how they're going to be put together. We do anticipate some tough choices. I anticipate that we're going to have way more than $25 million in worthy projects for this community, and it will be difficult to make some of those decisions.
Is that something you want us to discuss as a commission now, Sarah? Would that be helpful to you to discuss August 5th? Sorry, Commissioner Thelman, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, I mean, I was going to say the same thing. I think unless someone has made plans for that August 5th, I think we are going to need every possible meeting we can get in there to not be overwhelmed by this. Everything I hear about it I talked with Steve Kelly today, who's just kind of overseeing one of the categories, and it's a lot. We're going to have a lot to digest and a lot to balance, and I just think we're going to want more time, not less, for sure. So I'm certainly happy to reschedule that meeting.
And one thing I would say about it, I want us to have the possibility of having that meeting. I will tell you, we will have just received full packets. So it may not be, you may not have a strong recommendation at that point. So, but I think if right now I could have open the possibility that we may need to meet that day, have some sort of conversation, it would probably be helpful. But as I can't deliver on in terms of what we will have available at that meeting.
I mean, Sarah, because of what this is, and obviously this is, you know, not something that normally happens, if you're going to just be getting the packets, would it maybe be necessary to set up a special meeting specifically for this, the COVID cares, to give you some time to get through what you're going to present to us out of these packets, or how you're going to do it, instead of the quick turnaround that you just kind of indicated?
The commission is open to that. I would love to have that flexibility. We were talking today internally about that timeline, and being able to bring a recommendation back to the commission. So if you could kind of give me a week or two here to make sure I get that calendar put together and then come back to you and suggest a date or time for that special meeting, I'd appreciate that flexibility.
Yeah, that sounds fine to me. I mean, I'm happy to meet on the 5th, and I think this is a unique case where special meetings may need to be necessary. Oh, I expect that I speak for my fellow commissioners saying we want all the information we can get and know that it's still going to be not enough. So, yeah.
And yeah, I appreciate that. And you know, if we are able to or have conversations, it's certainly something we will do our best to share. I'm hoping before that meeting, we're going to try to set deadlines for reimbursements for the public sector reimbursement piece of this to come in advance of that, because remember that takes money off the top. So, you know, the direct aid plan will not be 24.99 million. It will be 24.99 million minus any public entity reimbursements. So that was the timeline we talked about today, is trying to get that information in really, I mean, ideally within the next week or so, so that we could go back to the commission and say, we've got $1 million in reimbursements. And so the new number for the direct aid plan is this much less.
Thank you, Sarah. Anything else, Sarah? Anything else, commissioners? Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any other miscellaneous items?
No.
Okay, seeing none, thank you all for your service today. And we will see you next Wednesday. It sounds like at 4 o'clock. We are adjourned.
Take care.